Ever feel like, you're stuck, like you're trying to make a real difference in the world, but also stay true to your values? It's this tricky balance.
Yeah, it's a tension a lot of us face, for sure. And this deep dive, it's all about that. We're looking at someone really wrestling with that dilemma.
Exactly. We're really diving deep into this personal reflection. They use their religious faith, Christianity specifically, to kind of frame this whole internal struggle.
And, it might sound niche at first, but honestly, the insights are super relatable, even if you aren't coming from that same background.
100%.
Yeah.
The author starts by laying out this conflict they feel, a deep belief in absolute truth, which comes from their faith, clashing with, the real world, the world where compromise, it often feels unavoidable.
And what I really appreciate is that they don't shy away from that struggle. They lean right in.
Mm.
Like they talk about this feeling of being paralyzed.
Hmm.
Like any action they could take might mean betraying their ideals.
Yeah.
They even call it, and this is brilliant, purity spiraling.
Purity spiraling. Okay, I need to hear more about this because I think a lot of people listening probably get that.
Right. So purity spiraling, the way they describe it, it's like this trap. You keep raising the bar for what counts as good enough, so you end up rejecting anything that's less than this perfect ideal, even if it means doing nothing at all.
Which leads right into this idea of being in the world but not of it, right? It's like they're trying to figure out how to engage, make a difference, but not get sucked into compromises that feel wrong.
Exactly. It's this delicate dance. And what I find so valuable is that they don't pretend to have all the answers. They're just wrestling with it, honestly and openly.
And that makes it so relatable. It's not about having this magical solution, but more about navigating that constant back and forth. So how do they suggest we actually approach this challenge, this whole in the world but not of it thing? How do we make that concrete?
Well, they bring up this concept of economia, which is about building flexibility into your belief system. It acknowledges that sometimes staying true to the heart of a principle, it might actually mean being flexible in how you apply it to a specific situation.
So not ditching your values altogether, but finding ways to live them out that make sense in the real world.
Exactly. It's about recognizing that the perfect solution isn't always an option. Sometimes, to make progress, you need a bit of pragmatism.
Okay, so then how do they say we should handle that? Because realistically, that's got to get tricky. Where do you even begin to find that balance?
Oh, it definitely can be. And actually, they tell this really insightful story from their own life to show this whole thing in action.
Ooh, I love those personal touches. Makes it so much more real. What was it?
So they were working on this project, right? Something super close to their heart, feeding people experiencing homelessness. And it was like perfectly aligned with their values. But then they hit this roadblock. They needed permits, all this paperwork to actually give the food out.
Ugh, bureaucracy strikes again. I can see how that would be frustrating. Trying to do something good, but those hurdles get in the way. Sounds like a textbook case of the tension they're talking about.
Exactly. And they said this was a turning point. They had to figure out, okay, do we stick to our guns, even if it means delaying everything, maybe even canceling the whole project? Or do we adapt? Find a workaround, even if it means bending a little on the original plan.
So which way did they go? Did they compromise?
They did. They realized that clinging too tightly to one definition of success,
Mm-hmm.
in this case, following their initial plan to the letter, it was actually going to prevent them from doing the most good. So they decided to work within the system, even if it felt imperfect, just to get things moving.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's about recognizing when sticking to your guns might backfire. Sometimes reaching your goal means you got to be flexible, find creative solutions within the limitations.
Exactly. And this kind of ties into a bigger point they make about the danger of idealizing the past. They even quote Ecclesiastes. Say not thou, what is the cause that the former days were better than these?
It's like every era has its own issues.
100%. If we get stuck looking back with rose-colored glasses, we miss out on the opportunities right in front of us.
And I think that's where gratitude comes in. It's so easy to focus on what's wrong, what we wish was different, that we forget to appreciate what's good right now.
Totally. And the author points this out. They're grateful for things we take for granted, like being able to read religious texts or connect with their faith community. Even while they're struggling, they find things to be thankful for.
That's such a good point. It's not about pretending everything's perfect. It's about finding those bright spots, the things that give you hope and keep you going.
Yes. Finding that balance, seeing the flaws, but also appreciating the good, and then letting that guide your actions.
So then, how do we take all this, the idealism, the pragmatism, the gratitude, and put it into practice? Because it's one thing to talk about it, but how do we live it out in a way that feels real? That always makes a difference. Like, what's the recipe, right? You take some idealism, a bit of pragmatism, a dash of gratitude, but how do you measure that stuff out?
Yeah, it's not exactly baking a cake,
Yeah.
but you've hit on something key. It's about finding what works for you,
Hmm.
your own values, your goals. And I think
Hmm.
if the author were here, they'd say a lot of it comes down to just being willing to act, even when it's scary.
Not waiting for that perfect moment or solution, because who knows if that ever actually comes.
Exactly. They actually say this in the reflection. It really stuck with me. The world needs our engagement, not our paralysis.
Hmm.
So like a call to arms, get in there and do something.
Yeah, it's easy to get stuck in that loop of I have to do it right, whatever right even means, that nothing gets done at all.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
And they talk about that fear, messing up, not being good enough, how paralyzing it can be. They're like, what if we flipped the script? Instead of, what if I fail? It's, what if I succeed?
Yeah, focusing on the good you could do, even if it comes with risks. Some things might not be perfect. It's about holding those two ideas, the idealism and the pragmatism, and just moving forward somehow.
Exactly. And that's such a good place to leave it, I think. Because we'll never hit perfect balance, this back and forth, idealism, pragmatism. It's ongoing. We're always learning, adapting.
So as we're navigating this messy world, right,
Hmm.
let's remember those ideals. They're what inspire us, that vision of something better. But we've also got to be willing to get our hands dirty, embrace the imperfections, the small wins along the way.
Absolutely. Because that's where it happens.
Yeah.
The messy stuff, the imperfect actions, that's where real change comes from.
We hope this deep dive has given everyone something to think about, new ways of looking at things as you're figuring out your own path. Until next time, keep asking those tough questions, keep growing, and keep making a difference however you can.